Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to speak at this important conference. I'm just honored to be here with you today. And if you think about, we've come together today. It's a pivotal point in history. We are losing vast bodies of culinary wisdom from our elders and our peers every day. The launch of the Asian Food Studies Conference and Confederation is a really important time for us to get together and communicate more efficiently. The preservation of culinary heritage is a shared responsibility that involves contributions from individuals, companies, government, universities from around the world. So please allow me to present how Ontologies can empower cross-cultural communication and sharing of knowledge more efficiently. So let's begin with a simple exercise. Actually, right, how many colors did you see? Our reality is always influenced by the context of our environment. Always very, very important. So I'd like to begin my keynote with a short story. A short story, however, the past 3 decades, I've been trying to become more wise about the culinary cultures of Asia, more specifically Southeast Asia. Upon meeting my Malaysian-born wife 34 years ago, she brought me to Malacca in southern Malaysia, and I fell in love with the region and, of course, her. This is when I began to really do research of what makes each country, each culture unique, however similar. So the term ontology, let's get that solved first. It's a question that many of you have already. In the past, it stayed in a philosophical discussion. However, the advent of databases, languages for computers, and more recently, with artificial intelligence in our everyday lives, that this has become more and more important. In the realm of food studies, researchers frequently grapple with data that hasn't been formatted consistently or standardized, especially when we look back at historical or anecdotal stories. We look at personal recipes, oral traditions, and culinary records. While scholars may have made significant progress in organizing data from the past, we need to look to the future to document food cultures as they develop. So what I've observed in the past, especially 10 years, there's a lack of a unified model for capturing and annotating culinary heritage during research, education, and publication. And I'm going to tell you today how Ontologies can change that. So, let me tell you a story. So to unravel the complexities of cultures that have formed for thousands of years to form this diverse cuisines of Asia, I've relied on many sources. My approach is to travel, cook, experience, and capture multimedia data, photos, videos, text, audio recordings, because there are only 4 types of data in the world and combinations of them. So I began to capture this information in my mind and in countless hard drives, as you all know. I learned to prepare local herbs and spices, cook traditional recipes, and present these foods and beverages to my friends, my family, and my clients, and my students. So more than 1 million miles later of travel in the last 30 years, I've really formed a knowledge base. And that knowledge base I draw upon daily to teach my students, to write books, to publish and share that knowledge. And then together, we, with that communal intelligence, discover insights to innovate new products as we've heard about. But food doesn't stay stagnant. It evolves every day, every year, and every decade. new ingredients, new cooking techniques, and there's new ways to present these foods and beverages. So finally, at the age of 53, I feel I'm becoming more wise. I've gotten to the top, what I like to call the staircase of knowledge. And what I like to believe is we're going to be able to communicate more efficiently and move from data up to wisdom, and then decode wisdom down to data, utilizing ontologies. So let me tell you a little bit more of how we do that. Now, that story I just told you is the same story. However, here, it's brought together with visuals. I share this to give you a perspective, to put the context of my presentation today, of my point of view. I may have began as a cook, a dishwasher in restaurants 36 years ago, becoming a cook, becoming a chef. Yet, when I started to teach full-time at a college, when I began to write, when I began to publish, that is when I really realized I needed a better way to communicate knowledge than just tell stories. It wasn't enough for the complexities of these cuisines. Telling stories on TV is one thing. However, being part of this academic community is more important. And I think there's hybrids of that. So I'm confident that using technology together as an Asian food studies community, we can communicate more efficiently. So I just restarted my education. I've gone back to school. I started my master's degree at Boston University earlier this year. And so today I stand in front of you as a student, as a lifelong learner, and as a teacher, and as a colleague. So let's talk about how ontologies can actually help us. Can you just go forward? I'll just point and we can continue that way. Thank you. So my goal today is to give you a taste of what ontologies are and show you some examples. Not get into the methodology to develop them. Maybe that's next year because that's the next level. But using ontological models as tools, we can bridge the gap in communication. We can translate more efficiently. We can interpret more accurately and understand the differences and similarities across our cultures as we come here today from countries all over the world. These intricate relationships between ingredients, preparation, and presentation, and the culinary etiquette in which we do. In fact, you're going to see ontologies actually explain the very fundamentals of our world. So let me explain. There we go. So let's begin at the very basics. The classification of everything natural on this planet. This taxonomy system that we're all familiar with started in the 1700s, but still used today, where it breaks down everything on the planet, frankly, into the context of other things on the planet and how they relate together. As a cook, as a chef, this actually matters to me because it often informs what I cook, how I cook it, how I prepare it, and let me explain more. So here, let's look at one kingdom to start off with. There's only 5 kingdoms on the planet. This isn't my opinion. This is what the community has agreed upon. Some of them have a really flavorful role in our world. Some we eat as they are, primarily the animals, the plants, the fungi, there they are. But some of them, like the bacteria, act as catalysts. These are the building blocks of fermentation. These affect everything. So they come together through fermentation and enzymatic breakdown. So here, let's go a little bit closer here. As a chef, I know how to cut, prepare, and cook some things simply because of what class they're in. As a young cook, when I went to school and they show you, well, this is a fish, this is a flat fish or a round fish, Instantly, you know how to cut it, how to cook it. So it informs cuisine based on biology. This isn't my opinion. This is the way the world works. Ontologies is thinking of existence, not necessarily this is what it is, but what is around us. These are universal classifications globally. But what about culinary arts? Let's get into the food side of it. Now, why did the French and French cuisine become the kings of the culinary kingdom and culinary education? Think about it. Formal culinary education in schools around the world in general are based on French. Well, why is that? In my opinion, these two chefs, the original R&D chefs actually, right? Research and development chefs are responsible for part of that. On the left, you have Carême. Carême was the first chef to codify the mother sauces in France. He didn't invent them. He looked around and codified them. Then Escoffier on the right, he actually created the brigade system, which is the way that kitchens are organized. So why does that matter? I mean, think about this. Before the 1700s, there were no restaurants like we know today. There were places you can go eat to restore, hence the word restaurant, but you couldn't order off a menu. You couldn't choose what you wanted. Think about that for a moment. He organized the kitchen brigade system so we can take recipes, break them into pieces, cook them, and assemble them and scale the food and beverage industry. Without some of these systems, we wouldn't have food manufacturing. This is the way we've actually scaled. And these models helped enable cross-cultural communication. Because if we have a standardized model of what the mother sauces are, we can communicate, we can translate, and we can share that knowledge more efficiently. And so that is the premise of what I'm talking about today. So this isn't new to me, though. When I got into education, when I started teaching and writing books, I had to figure out a way to communicate very complex cultural phenomenon. And so this was a model I came up with. I guess it's a data model when you think about it, of different. And so when you dive into these culinary traditions, of course, where you are, it all starts with geography. Then we look at history, what happened in these regions. Then we look at ethnic diversity, who was there because of these. These come together into culinary etiquette, the way in which we eat. Then there's prevailing flavors that come up over and over. And all these factors are what inform and create recipes, dare I say the word authentic. But as an educator, when I came up with this model, frankly, this became the outline of a lot of my presentations. And then students could get it. Not just telling stories, showing videos, cooking. Yeah, but how do I understand something that's very complex? So here's a very simple example. So these are examples of 3 different Southeast Asian peanut sauces. All very different from the inputs of the ingredients, based on the preparation and cooking techniques, and then on the presentation. Because I argue, for those of you that are cooks or chefs in the room, or just people that eat, same ingredients, different technique, completely different flavor experience. And you get the model. It's, again, this isn't something I created. This isn't something I invented. It just makes sense. This is how it works. So then, oh, sorry, I was one behind because I'm not pushing up here. So quickly, I'll go back to that. Thank you. So here you can see the different ingredients, yet similar, even how the peanuts are cooked, right? Pan roasting peanuts is more common in Thailand or in Vietnam. But in Malaysia, if you're making a peanut sauce, a majority, it's going to be deep fried. It's a completely different flavor based on the technique. It's a different color. It's a different texture. Everything changes because of these. So then, boom, right? Everything changed when technology came on the scene, and there weren't just textbooks and wise scholars that held all their knowledge here and only shared what they wanted to, when they wanted to, for many different reasons. So now, how can ontologies help? Well, with coming in with technology, the very definition, the implementation of ontologies changed, completely changed. They weren't just used to understand the natural world anymore of what is, what exists. They were actually used to enable more effective cross-cultural communication. Ontologies became required for the internet. The internet will not function. Your searches will not perform as well. You will not find the information you need without global schemas and organization of this data. That's just how it is. So it is essential. So now, what is an ontology? We all used to rely on dictionaries, right? Words, definitions, pretty straightforward. The next step, if you think about lexicons, are words, definitions within a domain. An encyclopedia is even a little bit more, right? You layer on semantic relationships and you have an ontology. So what an ontology does different than a dictionary, different than a lexicon. It captures the meaning and the association between terms, concepts, and definitions. And I'm going to show you some examples. So let's do that. So here. Now, while ontologies have become critical in various industries, the medical sector was the first to adopt ontologies globally. Now, why? Because in medicine, accurate and standardized knowledge and translation into languages is a matter of life or death. This was a place we had to start. So a semantic ontological model isn't like a taxonomy. An animal is this, just that, but it's actually part of. A heart is a muscle and part of the circulatory system, right? Then you understand how it works, and we can do this with food. A rhizome, like turmeric, is an underground stem. It's not a root, although people call it a ginger root. Botanically, it's not a root. So it functions different, has a different purpose, has different chemicals, biological and chemical, because of what it is. Cinnamon is a bark of a tree. So it helps you understand the context of this ingredient. So the next example showcases how ontologies can be used to decide your health. Now think about that for a moment. To present personalized care to individuals, we need to understand the nature of the disease itself. So this sub-ontology primarily was developed and aim to help doctors, nurses, other medical practitioners of multiple cultures, different languages, communicate and make decisions. It's a decision tree. You do this in your mind every day. But how do you explain that to someone? How do you transfer that knowledge? How do you help other people? So ontologies are going to make translations more accurate, interpretation quicker. It's the same reason that we were asked to send our presentations ahead. If we sent our presentations ahead, the translators could take time to understand, not just translate. They need to interpret. Big difference between those two words. So, well, I took that original model that I did in 2000, and then 20 years later, I'm up in Napa Valley, California, at the Rethink Food Conference hosted by the Culinary Institute of America and MIT. And on walks Dr. Matthew Lang. He was at UC Davis then. And he has an organization called IC Foods. And he said this word ontology, I never heard it before. So if you're sitting here going, ontology? Like, what's that? Not oncology, but ontology. And I looked, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's what I do. I used to use mind maps and concept maps to outline what's tom yum soup. Like, really? Like, I don't know what it is. So what's the ingredients? What are the common versions of it? So that philosophy and methodology instantly improved my research. My abilities to communicate that information completely changed me as a person, like education does. We immediately saw the overlap and began to collaborate to evolve the model into something that could actually be processed in a computer. I looked at what were the global standards, and I found when I went out there He challenged me and said, go look at what the global schemas are to organize recipes on the internet. And I realized every single schema, BBC, Google, schema.org, the three main ones that organize all the information on the internet, didn't have the cultural context as part of a recipe. How? That's so important, the cultural context of it. I'm going to share this QR code later again that you can download all the papers that back up what I have. I have dozens of papers for you. So this model, back to the ontology of what is food, the original philosophical thought of it. What does it do? How does it create an unlimited variety of flavors? Here's the best example from the same individual and his team. It's from one paper. And if you think about it, it just makes sense, doesn't it, right? Every ingredient has a biological and chemical component. It's what we were just hearing about. These herbs have these chemicals, hence affect our bodies in these ways. They physically look like this, so we need to process it this way. It's an explanation of the world around us. It's not inventing or saying this is the only way to do it. So let's talk about global standards. So Food-On was created to represent knowledge about food as it's central to many human activities. Agriculture, medicine, food safety, shopping patterns, sustainable development. So Food-On is a controlled vocabulary that can be used by people and computers as we integrate our minds philosophically, physically, electronically with computers more. This is important. So if Food-On is the global standard at this point, let's look at the next one. So we go back to food product is part of a plant or an animal. Food is part of a taxonomy. So what's an example of that? Let's start simple. An egg ontology. Straight from Food-On. Well, what is an egg? What is a hen egg? You get it, right? Pretty straightforward. But then you look at the herbs and spices, and that's it. That's all there is so far. Obviously, so much is missing. Hence, why I come here today to share this tool, this way of thinking, so we can work together to help understand more about spices. This is all there is for spices. That's pretty weak to me. It's a much more complex environment. Look at the things in the old text, what research that's been done in Thailand now. But you know what? Believe it or not, some of you in the Asian region are ahead of the curve. Here at Chulalongkorn University itself, they started in a natural place. The natural place is herbal medicine. If medicine is where ontologies really started to get formalized, why wouldn't we see how herbs are used in that context? This is where medicine and food meet. Now, ingredients are transformed. As I said, ingredients and techniques. Different processes, different cooking techniques. So how do we use ontologies to understand how we transform ingredients, the cooking process, into things we eat and drink? So let's look at a food process ontology that some of us enjoy often. So here is a first example of a formal ontology that shows how grapes start, how they get processed, just to make grape juice. This is before the fermentation happens. And when you look at this, you notice in the bottom right, there's a codification. You start to understand what's happening. And when you start to do this with recipes, it'll change your world. You start to understand what's happening instead of, well, this is what grandma did. Hold on. Let's check at what all grandmas did and compare them and ask questions of these databases, which we can do now. So what I'd like to do in a moment is we're going to show a video before you start it. So I was, goodness, so fortunate to be invited to host a 26-episode docuseries going through 19 provinces of Vietnam. I spent a half of a year there, if not longer. And there were so many experiences that I had, but we were filming. If you've ever been in filming, you're moving constantly. So we go to the next city, we go to the next city, and we captured so much, but I didn't learn a lot of it. Now in central Vietnam, they make they make a lot of great things in central Vietnam. One of them in Nha An is Nam Dam, the city, is a type of soy sauce. But what was really happening there? I had to figure it out. So I started where you can see it's the same story, but in an ontological model, told through a data model. So the inputs are in yellow. Those are the ingredients that were added to it. She used long on leaves. She walked down the street from the fruit, inoculated the rice, and made her own koji. Nowhere else in the world is it going to taste like that again. But what is the species biologically, chemically, right? Then they're transformed, and they're transformed in green, physically and biologically, through fermentation, through breaking it down. She roasted the soybeans. You don't roast soybeans for soy sauce generally. It's not a common thing. Then the pink are the outputs, the actual flavor experience of it. So video nice, but really, what's happening in there? Like, wow. And again, I'll be sending this to you. So in Malaysia, 14 years ago, this is the most comprehensive herbal ontology I've ever seen. It begins in the middle, and you can see by the legend on the bottom right, where the circle is, they combined context from 3 fields. There, they covered medical, botany, and processing. And we were talking about the innovation of Thai herbs. If you don't understand the ingredient chemically, how it gets processed, and what part of the plant, that's not research and development. That's cooking. Big difference. So ontologies will help us do that. So let's talk about and wrap up here with the experience of flavor. So we've been creating flavor. What are ingredients? How do we create flavor? But what about the ontology of the flavor experience? So flavor is a synopsis of your psychological and physiological being. Often, right, in product development, in marketing, we say these are your demographics and these are your psychographics. This is what's going to influence you as a person to perceive what that tastes like. That's why personally, I disagree with the concept of a best restaurant. It makes no sense. There is no best. It is subjective experience. Your favorite, you have that right. To claim it's the best is nonsensical. I just don't think it's fair, actually. So each one of us is different, not just physically, but emotionally. Also genetics. Often in the US, I think the prime example we use in sensory science is coriander, cilantro. 7% of the population has a genetic trait that makes it taste like soap. It's not if they like it. That is who they are. So who you are changes it. So how might you do an ontology for flavor? Same group. Again, this was produced by IC Foods. In their paper, I think this is a great way of saying it. Sensory science, flavor remains a wicked problem. Not taste. Taste, we taste 5, maybe 7 things, right? Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami. And then calcium and fatty acids is what they're discovering. The top box, I think, is a great way of illustrating that beautiful brain picture, is the 5 senses that we have at varying levels. Some people are more sensitive, our tongues work differently, and our brains interpret what we taste differently. Every one of us. So to say this is how it is just not true. So sight, sound, and touch, vision, touch, and sound have been codified and digitized. But flavor, that's a combination of all of it. It's a much more complex situation. So if we go back to that philosophical approach, reality is perception. Your reality as an individual, as a group, is based on your perception, 100%. So I'll finish with this. So what about, let's say, your perception? Our perception of spice, spicy. Now, often people confuse, and this is my definition, I'm not saying this is the global definition, but as we know, spices, right, is one thing, spicy is another. But often spicy is associated with chilies solely. But how does it impact? So this is an ontology. I was teaching a class a few months ago at Boston University about Thai peanut sauces. That peanut sauce illustration, I have an 1.5-hour video about that, just that one subject. So here you can see, like in Thai, what's ped, Malaysian, pedas, Vietnamese, gai, whatever is spicy. Well, what is that? Well, if you look here, first, where do you feel it? Because it's a sensation. It is not a taste. It's pain. Right? That's not me. That's science. So here you can see how you feel in different ways, different ingredients. And in Thailand, I think is a great example. We're standing here in a cuisine and a culture that is known for spicy foods from chilies. But as most of us know, if I would have showed up here 600 years ago, no chilies, none. So where did the spice come from? Pepper, ginger, mustard, all these other things that gave you a sensation that is similar, yet different. So here's just an example of to understand concepts and communicate that. So I promised you, there we go. I have dozens of papers, lots of presentations that are in this folder that you're welcome to take time, because I'm sure this is a bit overwhelming because it's questioning the way that you think, I hope. Hopefully, this has inspired you to go, okay, I need to think about this. How does it relate to me? And how can I use this tool in my own life to teach, to publish, to understand the world around us? So please reach out to me. If you want to collaborate, ask questions, and give me feedback on this presentation, candidly. I so look forward to learning from each one of you over the next couple days. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.